the gift project that is being undertaken at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Many years ago, when I got started in this field, one of the things that I had was a dream. And that dream was that schools are places for talent development. Everybody has a dream, and that was my dream. Yes, they're there for learning subjects and advanced work and all of the other kinds of things that young people go to school for. But my dream has always been schools are places for talent development, as was so nicely expressed this morning here by even some of our young people who were presenters. Now, a few years ago, people thought that all of the good things that were going on in school, creative thinking and critical thinking and problem solving, those were the preserve of programs for gifted education. And I have argued for many, many years that in fact we should be developing these skills in all people. And this is part of the major goals of the GIFT project, as you will see in a later slide. But even things like the Partnership for 21st Century Learning has said that we should be developing these kinds of skills in all young people. It's not to say that we can make all young people gifted or not gifted, but we can develop far more talent if we focus on the entire school population. Today, I will try to cover these 6 points. My work and the work of my colleague and wife, Dr. Sally Reese, who will be speaking later, really focuses around a model which we call the Schoolwide Enrichment Model. And that means that we're going to try to deliver talent development, part of our dream, talent development opportunities for many, many young people. So I will try to go through these 6 topics in the time that's been allotted for me. The first is just a little bit of background about our model, and I love this quotation by Ashley Montague, also attributed to Maria Montessori. Teachers are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. What happens in the future of any society, any country, is really a function of the kind of training that you as teachers provide to young people. And so I hope that you might enlarge your dream a little bit the way I've enlarged my dream, because that's what makes things change. It is hard to describe in 50 minutes 40 years of research and development. And so one of the things that I did was I did send a couple of articles beforehand that were on the website, the Chinese University of Hong Kong's website. And rather than cover a lot of that theoretical background, you may download those at the website as well. I also have here my website at the University of Connecticut that you can download and reproduce or translate any of the materials that are at that website. Most of them have been produced under $50 million of federal grants from the United States government, and there is no charge. You may download all of those. So now let's begin with sort of where we're coming from in the school-wide enrichment model. And you'll have to watch me here for a minute. As you already know, all learning, and when I say all learning, I mean from diapers to doctorate, exists on a continuum. And that continuum ranges from deductive, didactic, prescriptive. I have information I'm going to put in each of your heads, all the way over to inductive, investigative, and inquiry-oriented. Now, I'm not saying this is all bad and this is all good. What I'm saying is we need some balance. So let's look at this. And here we see, again, on the deductive side, and notice the behaviorists on that side, Pavlov, Thorndike, and Skinner. They didn't study children. They studied dogs, rats, and pigeons to train them to do the things that they wanted them to do. Over here on the right-hand side, we see people like Pestalozzi and Torrance and Montessori, people you know, modern theorists like Howard Gardner, Piaget, Brunner, Robert Sternberg. Now, our focus has been generally on this side of the model. of the learning theory continuum. Again, not to say that we argue against this, that's not at all. You see the footnote. However, we believe that the gold standard, the inventors, the designers, the entrepreneurs, the writers, the leadership of the next century comes from this side rather than this side, although it's a combination. So what we are asking for is basically a balance. Now, the two articles that I sent on the website and love to talk about but don't have time today are a theory of knowledge that underlies our work. And very briefly, we have received knowledge and analyzed knowledge, very important parts of gifted education. However, those two types of knowledge have no value until we can apply them to something that is personally meaningful and hopefully will improve whatever we're studying or improve all of mankind. One of the major aspects is that we always want some output from our model: visual, oral, written, constructive. There must be a product. Now, most of my work is based on 4 theories. The first one, the 3-ring conception of giftedness, is very popular in the literature, and it says that we must look at other things than just IQ or measured academic ability. The second one, the enrichment triad model, we'll be focusing on today. And because of time, I will only deal with these 2 theories. The other theories have to do with executive functions and then children using their gifts to make the world a better place. And you'll see some examples of this in part 2, because all of these things blend together. It's not any one of the 4, but they all work together. And again, these articles are on your website. They were sent previously. Now, these 4 theories underlie our theory, which is called the Schoolwide Enrichment Model. The cube is the organizational structure, and in the center, lower part of the center, is the pedagogical focus of our model. And again, that is in the articles that were previously sent. I've put a, whoops, press this once more. I've put a big plus mark by enrichment clusters because I'm going to emphasize a few clusters today, and they have been what I call the growth stock of our model. We have begun school-wide enrichment programs in thousands of schools around the U.S. and around the world, but we always ask them to start with enrichment clusters, and it is for this one reason. By giving teachers the opportunity to work in an enrichment cluster, it frees them of their dominance by lesson plans and unit plans and the structured kinds of teaching, which are more on this end of the learning continuum. There are 3 very simple goals of the school-wide enrichment model. The first one is enjoyment. You know from your own life's experience, anything you enjoy doing, you work better at. You try harder. If you like to cook, if you like to paint, if you like to garden, you do more, you experiment, you're playful. You meet with other people that like to do that, so it's common sense. Now, enjoyment leads to, oops, enjoyment should have been up already. Sorry about that. I got 2 screens here. Enjoyment leads to engagement. Engagement, again, is getting totally involved in the things you like to do. You'd rather be doing it. The teacher doesn't have to say, come on, you've got to work harder. The teacher says, it's time to go home. Stop working on that. You love that so much. And then engagement leads to enthusiasm for learning. Anything that you learn that you are enjoying and engaged in, you work harder at and you learn better. Learning is a fun process if it's not a gun at your head for preparing for the go-cow, right? Now, what our research has shown is very interesting. In schools, and I'll show you some data on this in a while, schools that have used our model, enjoyment, engagement, enthusiasm, their achievement scores have actually gone up. Now, our model differs from a lot of other approaches in gifted education, and I'm going to just point out a couple of them. We believe that our enrichment triad model, type 1 enrichment, exposing students to different issues, ideas, etc., that they might want to follow up on. Type 2 is a broad range of thinking skills. You'll see more detail later. Type 3 is individual and small group investigations of real problems. I have another definition I'll give you in a minute. We believe that this should be the pedagogical core of the learning that goes on in a school-wide enrichment model school. Now, how do we differ from other schools? First of all, we provide general enrichment to all students. All students go to the aquarium or go on a field trip or hear a speaker. And then the students that are extremely interested, they can follow up from a type 1 to a type 2 or directly from a type 1 into a type 3. They can also, it could come from regular classroom or it could come from outside of school. And you'll see examples of this as we move along. Our brand of acceleration is more personalized and individualized. We've developed a process called curriculum compacting, where if a student is 2 or 3 grade levels ahead in mathematics or in reading or in science, then we provide students with more advanced material in those areas. Now, I like to describe type 3 enrichment as the young person thinking, feeling, and doing like the practicing professional, even if they're doing it at a more junior level than a scientist from your physics department at Chinese University or a filmmaker like Steven Spielberg from Hollywood. They're doing what the big people do. They're only doing it at a more junior level. So your question to me should be, well, that sounds good, but how do you make them do that? How do you get them to do that? I will try to cover that as we move along. So, why am I happy to be here? Why is this a part of my dream? Because of the words I've highlighted. This comes directly from the project that you are working on. Bring out the best in every student, develop the capabilities of all students. And this is not to say that there are not some students that are extremely advanced, and obviously we should be dealing with them. Now, part 2, the focus of my work has been on the right-hand side, my right-hand side, developing creative, productive giftedness. And it's hard to describe what this is, so I'm going to give you a few examples. This is a little girl whose name is Kylie Copenhagen. And Kylie fell in love with ladybugs during a regular school experience in a regular science school experience. And so the teacher, this would be considered a type 1, and it comes from regular classroom. The teacher said, wow, well, you're really turned onto that. Why don't you do some more work? So pretty soon, Kylie, with the help of her teacher and some adults, started to develop what later became known as the Ladybug game. So how did we help her? Getting her websites, getting her what we call Howto Books. Next to my wife, my greatest love in life is Howto Books. And pretty soon, Kylie actually developed a game, a board game based on ladybugs. So here we have a 12-year-old girl, worked on this for about 3 years, eventually found a publisher. You can now go to Walmart or one of those stores and you can buy it. So that's an example. And I like to point that out because it came right from the regular curriculum. The teacher had the good sense to notice the interest and to follow up on the interest. Now let's go to another one. This is one that actually came from a non-school experience. This is a little boy named Brooks McConnell. He was watching television with his mother, and they were watching the Katie Couric show, and on the show was a young man who has a disease called progeria. That's a disease where you look very old when you're at a young age. And one of the things that Sam said was that he always felt bad because he always wanted to ride a roller coaster. Picture a light bulb turning on in Brooks's head. What he did, and this is a very long story, but what he did was we got him a lot of how-to books. We got him in touch with some engineers at the University of Connecticut, and he built a simulated roller coaster. He went on a roller coaster with a video camera, and he filmed the roller coaster, and he got the sounds, and then he made a vest with weights in the pockets and with magnets so you could feel the vibration. And pretty soon he built this roller coaster. Here you see he was a hands-on winner. This is now his type 3 level in the Connecticut State Science Fair. And he didn't stop there. Notice this next one. He contacted 3 major roller coaster companies, and he's now negotiating with them to build a simulator at the entrance of roller coasters in amusement parks in the US. So this is a perfect example of what we mean by creative productivity. And in this case, the interest started outside school. The school was an inviting place. It said, yes, let us help you, let us give you support. Now this next one is an enrichment cluster. And this is a group of children, and it's a very central part of our model. We recommend if you start a SEM school, you start with enrichment clusters. But this has to do with where thousands of children go to a historic site in New Jersey for a field trip. It has great history to it. So in this school, all of the fourth graders, maybe 200 or 300 of the fourth graders, went to this site. It's called Waterloo Village. But when they got back, they had a debriefing, a discussion, and about 12 or 14 children decided that they wanted to do something to save Waterloo Village because it was going to be closed for financial reasons. Moving along rather rapidly, very briefly, people have always asked who our model focuses on. We do use the three-ring conception of giftedness, and we've developed a lot of instruments. You'll see samples in a minute, but basically, we're certainly looking at the top 5%. Those are children who have great, outstanding academic strengths, and we want to provide those for those children. However, we also look at in our talent groups, the next 15 to 20% with strong interests in particular areas, and even some people that are below the top 15 or 20%. Thomas Edison, America's most famous inventor, never went beyond the fourth grade. He was considered to be dull-minded by his father and his teachers. Only his mother had faith in him. This man, Richard Branson, who started Virgin Airlines, if you've seen him on TED Talks, he has a very severe learning disability, but most of the innovations in modern airlines are the result of his work. This person, some of you may have heard, her name is Temple Grandin. She does speak at a lot of gifted conferences. She has high-functioning autism, but she is the world's leading authority in the humane treatment of animals that are raised for food. And here's one that is we wouldn't know about. Steven Spielberg. I have a letter written by his mother that says every teacher he ever had said you should send him to special education, you should send him to a psychiatrist, a psychologist. He wasn't a good learner. So you see, these are the kinds of kids that we overlook if we don't focus on their strengths or talents. My favorite, I just received this a short time ago. This is a man named John Gurdon. He is the winner of the 2013 Nobel Prize in Medicine. And notice that he keeps on his desk a letter in a frame. That was sent by one of his teachers, and here's the letter. I've typed it so you can read it. It says how bad his work has been. One such piece prepared with 2 marks out of a possible 50. This is the part I like. His other work has been equally bad, and several times he has been in trouble because he will not listen, but will insist on doing his work in his own way. And again, he won the Nobel Prize. He just learned in a different way. Well, that's very important. So over the years, my colleagues and I have developed instruments in these 5 or 6 areas. Interest assessment, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Interest assessment instruments, learning styles, expression styles, executive functions, and we've just recently finished a parent instrument. It hasn't been published yet. It will be out very soon. And by the way, you're going to get copies of this PowerPoint, so you don't have to worry about notes or me going too fast. So basically, what we try to do is go across abilities, interests, and then various stylistic preferences, getting different kinds of information related to learning modalities, relating to learning environments, and instructional preferences. So that's been a really large part of our work. Now, we fashioned this work into an identification system, and it works something like this. And this is online at our website if you're interested in getting the full copy. But basically, yes, we want to get our highest scoring children. No problem there. That's what gifted programs are all about. And to do this, we use norms, local norms, highest scores. You decide what cutoff scores In this case, we're looking at the top 15%. So that first group would be 92nd or above percentile. The second group, the second group, notice, comes from non-test score information. And we use teacher ratings, alternate pathways, special nominations, parent information, and then selection nomination criteria. But here's the important thing. Half of our talent pool is selected on the basis of test scores. I'm not going to ever argue with that. But the other half, the Steven Spielbergs and the John Gurdons, they will come from other kinds of information. We use this information to prepare what we call multiple talent pools. And every child can fit into one of those with some strengths. They might be physical science, or it might be mathematics, it might be computers, but even those talent pools can be further subdivided. In the science, it might be they like bugs and snakes and lizards, but they don't like physical science. And so what we want to do, and I guess I summarize it all with this next fly-in, all grouping and subgrouping for enrichment clusters and differentiation is based on target areas of student strengths and interests. That's how we get the Kylie Copenhagens and we get the Brooks McConnells who did the roller coaster, by targeting on those interests. Now, I am a bit of a mind reader. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how in the heck can I do this? I've got all of these kids, and some are interested and some are not, and some are fast and some, you were thinking that, where you're not. Okay, let's be smart. Let's do what Amazon and Netflix does. Do you know that every week I get personal letters from Amazon and Netflix? Look at, dear Joseph Renzulli, hello Joseph Renzulli. Now what do you think they send to me? Do you think Amazon sends me the list of the 30 billion books that have been published in all languages of the world? Of course not. They send me books that they think I will read because they know me. They know what I've read before and what I've bought before. Buy a pair of shoes from them, you'll never get away. Okay, so a number of years ago, Sally and I always said you can't do the kind of teaching in our model without technology resources. So a number of years ago, we started a system, forgive the title, the university financed it and named it Renzulli Learning System. And here's how it works. The students sit down at a keyboard, and all those instruments that I mentioned before, they've all been digitized, and the student answers questions based on them. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on age and reading speed. And what that does is it produces a student's profile. Now, that profile is then scanned by a magnificent search engine, 14 different databases, which you'll see later on. And it analyzes the profile, and it gets resources just for that student. And so this is true personalization, and that's how you find the time. The computer does the hard work for you. So here's an example of one of those profiles. This is a little girl named Valerie. We see her 3 interests, her 3 learning styles, her 3 expression styles, but let's let Valerie tell you the story.
Valerie Stickles, and I'm a 6th grade student. I am one of the people who tried out this Renzulli Learning website, and it was a really great website. I got my profile back, and I am one who loves poetry, and I really love poetry, and on my profile, it actually said that I loved poetry, and so whenever I went on to my critical thinking or books, it was going to be all about poetry. On some poetry websites, they actually let me submit my work to contests and everything, and I haven't heard back from them yet because it's supposed to take a few weeks, but I can't wait to hear back, and so I'll hear back from my own email address. And I got helpful hints on poetry also. There was a website where you could actually go and type in your poetry, and then you could kind of have it revised, and they would tell you stuff. And so I did get to do a little bit.
One of the things in our work is that we believe that we can use the technology to infuse enrichment into any and all regular curricular areas. And I'd like to show you how this works with two examples. The first example is the US Constitution, which every American child studies. Although with Donald Trump around, I don't know if it'll last long. But anyway, notice the top row in this, and I'm sorry I don't have my pointer. Well, I can do this, can I? This top row will always stay the same. So the top row is the same for all 4 students here. And that's the ones that the teacher has selected, and she sends them to the students electronically. The bottom row is all different with a little bit of overlap because it is one topic. But because of their interest and their learning styles and their expression styles, they would get different resources. So the top is what we call the must-dos, the bottom is the can-dos. So this is the way of jazzing up a very traditional American curricular topic. Here's another example. This is a teacher who is studying ancient Egypt, so she put Egypt into the search engine, and she came up with many, many different sites. And here's one called Fun with Mummies, and she read about it, and she thought the children would like it, so she made them aware of it. And in this case, the child can dissect and preserve their own mummy. They get one of the tools, they get the hook, and they take the brains out. They put them in a bottle, they label the bottle with the Egyptian word, they get the scalpel, which is down here, they remove the organs, they dissect. Very, very highly engaging. Engagement is really what learning is all about. Now, this next one I'm going to cover very briefly is called curriculum compacting. One of the things we know is that many students can cover the regular curriculum in a faster time period than others. And so therefore, what we've done is we've developed a process called curriculum compacting, and it's a very simple process. We look at the curricular objective to be covered. Have they covered it? Do we have proof of that? And then what can we substitute? So it's a time-buying process, and I'm getting messages here about time, so I've got to move along. We're up to part 5, and we're doing not badly. Now, this next slide is a sort of a summary as if you're interested in implementing the model. And the little icons that you see are all things from our enrichment database in Renzulli Learning. So if you're doing type 1s, you've got things like virtual field trips. If you're doing type 2, creativity activities. If you're doing type 3s, there's guidelines for doing research. So we've built the system. We've built the technology system around the learning theory. And I wish I could say more than that, but I'm getting time messages. Type 1, examples of type 1, and that is visiting speakers. This is a president of a local historical society, and after he talked to many, many children, he asked which ones would like to do some studies of unanswered historical issues. And look at the looks on the faces of those children. You see, the other ones weren't, they were really into it. So we follow type 1s with debriefing. Now, when it comes to thinking skills, we have developed the thing which we call the type 2 taxonomy. And here we've listed these 6 different areas of thinking skills. And one of the things that we recommend is that over the years, you find activities that fit each of those categories, and you start to build a scope and sequence so that across the grade levels, children will cover each of them. So let's just pick one that I decided to illustrate for today. Let's pick 1A, creative thinking skills. In our database, we have activities. What are all the different uses of an old tin can, a paper bag? This next one I like. How can you group these things together? And I've never used this with children where somebody hasn't grouped something together that I never saw before. A couple of weeks ago, a child grouped the comb and the Chinese junk together because of the parallel nature of the lines, and I'd never seen that. There's no single predetermined right answer, so there's lots of these. Now, I want to get around to type 3. Remember what I said, investigation of real problems. There are 4 important characteristics of type 3, which you see on the screen. I believe that the 4th one is a very important one, because that causes, if my work is going to go out to be published or to be displayed or to be presented, I'm going to work very hard to make it as good as I can make it. So audience is a part of the modus operandi of the creative, productive individual. We don't believe in, what we believe in our model is you build the curriculum around the child. You start with an individual or group. They show an interest in a particular area. Think of Waterloo Village or other examples that you'll see later with Sally. And then we provide different services, the how-to books, the human material resources. We give them feedback. And again, I think the key that helps to unlock it is finding appropriate outlets and audience. We begin with what we call a management plan, which is a guide that lays the work out. I know you can't read this, but what this guide says is, who is your audience? What's your intended outlet and product? What audiences will you have? How will you get started? What methodological resources you'll use? So this is pretty much the same way I guide a doctoral student working on a PhD. Pretty much the same. Again, love of my life is how-to books. They exist in every area. We have a complete library of these in our curriculum lab at the University of Connecticut. Teachers make great use of them. We have lots and lots of them. Now, in your handout, you'll see, again, no lesson plans, very important. No unit plans. That's going back in this direction. Authentic methods of professionals, that's the how-to books, divisions of labor, specially designated time blocks, and the rules of regular schooling are suspended. I'm going to skip along here to the conclusion. These are the 6 key questions that we ask in enrichment clusters. What do people with an interest in this area do? Not what do they learn, what do they do? And then what products do they create? How do they do it? We model this after, again, the creative, investigative, practicing professional. Summary and conclusions. Okay, this comes from the Japanese Democratic Party's political party. I love this. Those who own the rights to inventions own the world. And basically, we know how important this is. Everything we read today says that what we're looking for in our population, student population, are more inventive, creative, cooperative people. I want to tell you one very quick research study. These are 3 economists, not professors or psychologists in Holland, who studied a school that I started in Holland 25 years ago. And these are follow-up people in young adult lives now. They obtained higher grades. They followed more rigorous curriculum, especially women in the sciences. They started in more high-paying jobs and are making more money in the labor market. Don't forget, economists don't study happiness, they study money. And so here we see a good example, 25-year follow-up with hard data on an SEM school. People have asked me many times, what makes for an outstanding SEM school? Our staff gets together and talks about this. Here's our most recent summary. First of all, total faculty involvement, and therefore knowledge on the parts of everybody, the principals, the teachers, the psychologists. Very important that we're all on the same page. The second, and this is important to me, ownership, that you build it your way. The only thing we specify are the 3 E's: enjoyment, engagement, enthusiasm. How you do it is what makes you have ownership and makes your program unique, as long as your goal is to get to the 3 E's. That's the important part. The third thing is energy, working smarter, not harder, and this is where things, again, like the technology comes in. If you can do that, you can find thousands and thousands of resources in less and less time. This one is a very important one. Teachers and administrator trust. We will not work with a school unless the administrator is interested in the program and comes and stays in all the training. Because if they don't, no matter how well you train the teachers, if that administrator is a test prep person, then you're not going to get it done. The next thing is celebrations of excellence. When Sally started an SEM program many years ago, she started a thing which was called the Type 3 Fair. And every year, at the end of the year, all of the Type 3s were on display. All the students from all the schools came to see them. The parents came, the newspapers, the television stations. You have to let the public know that schools are places for talent development. Schools are where we develop talent. So anyway, the changing the culture of the school, and the only quote that I have on my office door is, teamwork makes the dream work. No single person can do this by themselves. So we conclude. Here you are standing by yourself out in the middle of the field. I love this Margaret Mead quote, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, and I would say like the people at the Chinese University of Hong Kong that are promoting this, and the Jockey Club for supporting it, those are the ones that change the world. The real difficulty in changing the course of any enterprise is not in developing new ideas, but escaping old ones. To make change, you gotta have a dream. And so I hope every teacher will say, I have a dream to make my school a school for talent development. And I love this. You gotta have a dream. Merci, thank you.